Hi, I'm Linda Johnson. I'm 14 and I'm not a mount maker. I'm here on behalf of Brigid Mountmaking because they, like good mounts, prefer not to be seen. They've asked me to share this presentation on how they work as contractors who travel to museums. Communication is so important to creating good object displays, and we hope that a deeper understanding of this process will help museums who work with contractors. We also hope that some of the tips and techniques they develop during their travels will be helpful to the mount making community. A little background for anyone not yet aware of this, but there is no shared and established path for learning mount making. Skills are passed down through an apprenticeship-like tradition, but materials and ideas are always changing. For comparison, think of conservators. They have an advanced degree and they tend to specialize in a type of object, like books or textiles. Mount makers have no official training, but they are both determining the book angles and building and fitting the mannequins. They're working on tiny, delicate pieces and rigging enormous sculptures. It's an enormous responsibility and anybody can list it on their resume. I've made some mounts. I could call myself a mount maker. For this reason, we think it's important for museums to know what to expect when they work with contract mount makers, and we're also kind of excited to share the things we've learned through the years. When we travel to museums, we break down the process into 5 stages: templating, fabricating, fitting, finishing, and installing. Apologies for being really basic here, but this is how we measure. Templating starts with a discussion with the museum about the display intent and feeling out object needs. Sometimes an object is drawn upright but would be safer or use a less obtrusive mount at an angle. It would be great if we had these conversations earlier in the design process, but this is when we're brought into a project. We start with getting a feel for the weight balance of the object. This daguerreotype is intended to be deck mounted at an angle. We do a simple outline, then plan out the stem location. In this case, we want to keep the stem low, aligned with the bottom hinge so it will be hidden. We draw lines to indicate the front tab locations, and note the rod location with the circled X. This mount won't need side tabs because of the shape of the object and angle, but it will need support arms up the back. We like using graph paper to keep things aligned and as a background for photos to later confirm dimensions. We check the object depth and how long the front tab should be. And then we trace a top view. We then note the distance off the deck or wall and display angle and take photos. We don't create detailed mount drawings except for large steel or special mounts. Instead, we want to talk through a mount design while handling the object with our client. We find that sketching out a mount plan doesn't add much value or improve communication. So this is basically everything we would bring to a templating appointment. We like to work with a safety square, which is a piece of colored fleece, the kind we use to cover mannequins. We like to keep smaller objects on the safety square, which helps create a visual barrier so that our tools don't end up too close to an object, which can totally happen, especially during fitting. The angle tool on the left is essential. We've confused ourselves a lot at first talking about display angles until we started specifying whether we were measuring off the deck or off the wall. In the pencil, Papermate number 2 is the only way to go. Fancy mechanical pencils are a pain. These pencils are perfect on every level. Dial calipers are a must. Mostly we use ours for transcribing dimensions to drawings. You can of course take external, internal, and depth measurements. Mylar is great to have on hand for anything you need to measure from the front, and we're fans of cutting up and taping together cardstock for anything tricky. These scissors are amazing. Tonic Studios non-stick micro-serrated 5-inch mini snips. They're heavy-duty scissors, but they're great for precise trimming of suede and felt without getting covered in gunk. We return to our shops for fabricating mountain blanks. We each have our own shop, Deanna in Illinois and Jen and Erika in Maryland. Sometimes we make blanks on-site, but in most cases, off-site fabrication is most cost-effective. Welcome to Erika's workshop. Remember to always tie your hair up in the shop. Jen and Deanna are set up for steel, but here we're set up for brass and acrylic. We order most of our brass through K&S, which used to be called Special Shapes. K&S carries alloy 260 brass, which is essential for bending and doesn't have the lead like 360. That's important with the amount of dust we produce. With the end of Special Shapes, the range of sizes got smaller. We bought up the remaining stock of 1/16 by 1/8. Sorry, guys. But K&S are still awesome because they offer 40% off orders over $500 and smaller discounts for smaller orders. So, if you've been paying full price for K&S brass at McMaster, you can thank us with cookies. With Special Shapes no longer making special shapes, we're relying on a rolling mill. Peppy Tools makes a high-quality rolling mill that we use to make flat stock. Rolled brass has beautiful round edges. For soldering, we use oxyacetylene torches. This one's a little torch, which we kind of have a love-hate relationship with. We also use Harris Safety Silver at number 56 for soldering. And our fire bricks we get from the hardware store, which we like so much better than the crumbly white vermiculite ones. And of course, the acid bath. This is a very important step. We find the oven silicone gloves and a pasta strainer are super handy to have around. This is what happens when you don't clean the flux off a mount. Flux causes corrosion when brass isn't properly cleaned. We've seen this green growing on mounts and cases on display at major museums. Clean mounts are so important to object safety. This spice is Extension Jaws by Nate Crouch. Probably everyone is familiar with a bender. A word of caution to newcomers starting out, you want to do a light. The vise is the place for the Boeing test. Objects on long stems should not be springing around like a jack-in-the-box or sagging on the wall from the weight of an object. A note to designers, we really want to know how far off the case we are so we can appropriately size stems. We like to use telescoping tubes with set screws for rigidity. Tap and through drill bit organizers are very helpful. If you're having trouble getting your bit through steel, check the sizing because the sizing for steel is different than that of brass. Also, a cassette tape organizer works great for storing your extra drill bits. If you're using one of those little 1-inch sanders, you're going to want to treat yourself to the 1-inch knife sharpening sander with a longer belt, which makes it really easy to reach around corners. The medium density Scotch-Brite wheel is a necessity, as is the red scrubby. It's important to feel edges after sanding. It's really easy to sand mount edges into little razors. So it won't look as pretty, but it's safer to blunt the inside of a mount tab to a round finish. So that's basically the shop. We would love to have a hard-inch lathe with power feeds and digital readouts, but this is really all you need for mount making. And now that the blanks are complete, it's time to return to the museum. This is our stackable traveling toolkit. The boxes each fit through an X-ray machine and are easy to get in and out of vehicles. This holds everything we need for fitting and install and also doubles as an install tool cart. Tools get heavy, so we only want to carry around what works. The fitting tools that work are Xuron 475 short nose. They're perfectly designed for getting sharp bends on mount arms. For bigger stuff, we love our monkeys. These are also called Ford or Coase wrenches. We prefer the monkeys with slimmer profiles and without fat wood handles. This is our custom Mountmaker screwdriver. It's short and stubby to free up your fingers for handling screws while attaching mount clamps. The handle fits into your hand so that the screwdriver doesn't drop while you're aligning a mount clamp. An epoxy sculpt addition to a jeweler screwdriver can also work in a pinch. We used to make little support bags with glass beads and stockinette until we saw the support bags that Matt Gay makes. He clued us into using Beanie Baby pellets and going big. These bags are great for holding up objects during fitting. The stockinette is from ProMed. We like to protect objects during the fitting process by using temporary padding. If you stick benchmark suede or felt to a mount and try pulling it off, the adhesive gets to be a mess or it loses its stickiness. Our solution is to stick 3M 415 tape to the adhesive on the padding. This creates easy to remove and reuse temporary padding for mount testing. And, a little fun thing, a cutting mat with radiating lines. This is so great to have handy for plate mounts. After the blanks are fit at the museum, we return to our shops to sand, prime, paint, and pad our mounts. Sometimes we do this work on-site, but in most cases, it's best done in our shops. Then we return to the museum for a final fit check and to make adjustments and color match. To keep our paint from drying out, we like to use a palette with the lid. Our favorite is Masterson's Stay Wet palette, which comes with special palette paper and a sponge. A paper towel works fine as a sponge replacement. A conservator clued us in to using a little bit of alcohol to keep the palette paper fresh. To avoid toxic fumes, we use Everclear instead of denatured alcohol. It's time to make mount notes for anything that isn't a simple lift to remove. We like to encourage collection managers to check how the object fits on the mount. It's important that they know how an object on a mount should feel when it's comfortable and safe. And then it's time for install. A few last thoughts for museums working with contractors. It would be great if museums consulted with mount makers when putting together a bid request. Most mount making RFQs are impressionistic at best. Museums ask for fixed prices for a scope of work that is totally open to interpretation. You need to ask for what you want. Otherwise, you might get a bunch of simple hooks, or you might pay for complicated mounts you don't need. Get to know your mount maker. Not just the company, but the people who will be doing the work. Call their references and say hi. Make sure you know what materials and barriers your mount maker is using. Silicone sheet is kind of amazing, but are you comfortable using it on porous objects? Has anyone done an Audi test? Please give feedback. Every contractor out there wants to do a good job. If something isn't working, we want to know. Thank you for joining us through the process from templating to install. There's one last thing we wanted to close with, the stress and emotional load of doing this work. Mountmaking draws on an immense amount of creativity, endurance, caution, and attention. In mountmaking, you will bleed, you will sweat, and you will cry. You will make mistakes and it will eat you up inside. To all the mountmakers out there, take care of yourself. And to everyone who works with mountmakers, thank you so much for taking the time to understand what we do.
Well, that's fabulous. That was amazing, Jen and Erika. Oh my God. And your your presenter, she was just amazing.
Thanks,
So
Jamie.
I'm going to have to go back and watch that a couple more times. That was really an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. So questions need to be asked, but is Sam doing questions?
Yes, I am.
All
Hi,
right.
Sam. Hello, Sam.
I'm passing
Hi,
it off
how
to
are
you.
you? Thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.
Hello, Erika and Jen. That was amazing. Absolutely fabulous. So enjoyable. So many great insights into Mountmaking, and I think just such an educational tool that could really be used across many museum professionals. Absolutely. I was really interested in what you were saying about the lack of formal Mountmaking training, and thought I've got a two-part question for you. So the first one is sort of tell us a little bit about your own experience and training, like how did you come into it, and what have you, how have you developed that sort of expertise over time? And then perhaps you could give us a bit of your thoughts around the solutions for this lack of formal Mountmaking training, and what you think the way forward is.
It's really interesting. Our company, and we also have to say hi to Deanna. She's not with us today. She's our other partner. But we all come from very different backgrounds. My background was working as a structural welder, which I find to be incredibly helpful, when doing this kind of work. Erika was a clockmaker, if you want to talk about that.
I guess just I have experience with precision machining, but not very useful in mounts for the most part.
And then Deanna actually came from being an elevator mechanic. And we all have fine art backgrounds. So we all have sort of, makerly thoughts and feelings and education in our past. But as far as being a mount maker, we've really just, we've learned by doing, and we've taken the technical skills that we have from our past experience and sort of put it into being mount makers. And the forum has been really amazing. We think it's really important to sort of invest in our community, and we see ourselves as an extension of conservation. So we really spend a lot of time looking at other people's mounts, reaching out to our colleagues, really trying to learn. Learning from our mistakes as well, which is always, sort of a thing. But yeah, it's tricky. I mean, as far as the education, it's a conversation that we have all the time. We were both fortunate to work, with good people in the industry in DC. We both worked with Rick Yamato, who some people are familiar with. And so, just sort of being there and apprenticing with people, I think is really the best way to go when you're trying to learn. I think people either have the inclination to do it or they don't. And when you meet people who are mount makers, it's, you just click because we're all kind of doing the same thing. So.
Thank you. Amazing. We've got a couple of practical questions. So somebody's asked, Erika's asked, what were the scissors that were featured in the presentation?
Oh.
Yeah, I think Tonic Studios.
Tonic Studios. We actually love them and have multiple pairs of them. So when we first started our company, Erika gave them to Deanna and I as a gift because she had been using them. And everywhere we travel, people see those scissors and get very excited. So they stay very sharp. They're easy to clean. You can find them very easily on the table. So
Thank you. Excellent. There's another question here that says, what is the range of time it generally takes for a simple brass mount versus an acrylic book mount versus a large complicated mount?
So one of the things I think is really interesting about being a contract mount maker is for us to stay competitive, we have to be very specific about our time. And over, the last decade, we've really figured out the best way to estimate. And so we estimate in 15-minute increments. So a simple brass mount may take 5 minutes to review, 30 minutes to fabricate a blank, 45 minutes to fit it, and then, 10 minutes to finish and fit, and 25 minutes for the installation. So, but every object is different. So we do try and kind of break things down in a like way. We build mounts from really tiny things all the way up to seismic steel mounts that weigh, hundreds and thousands of pounds. And so everything, it all just depends,
Yeah. Yep. So I'm sorry, we've only got 5 minutes for Q&A, so we're going to have to cut it short, but there are opportunities for people to ask you more questions. But I'm going to need to hand back over to Jamie. And again, thank you so much. That was just fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. I'm just blown away by this forum and by that presentation. So thank you, Erika and Jen. Just so good.